Good evening and welcome. Tonight I will be reading to you two more articles out of History Magazine. As you can see on the cover, and I guess in the title of the video, we'll be talking about Viking funerals. And we're going to start with this article about Emperor Constantine. And these articles were chosen by my channel members. This one was chosen by Sibylla, and this one was chosen by Luna. Thank you so much for picking these. So I was thinking, what do these two things have in common? Like, they're kind of religious, like there's a bit of spirituality in them, but I thought the best connecting thing would be that they're both historic events from Europe. So that's the theme, European history. I hope that that's a close enough connection. But let's get into it. If you would like to choose future History Magazine articles, now is the time to become a channel member. You can click the join button right down there to become a channel member, or the first link in the description box. It is only 99 cents a month. That price is never changing. There's never any tiers. It's as cheap as I can possibly make it. And now is the time, because probably when this video comes up, it'll be all done. But right now I'm waiting for the new issue to come, anxiously waiting by my mailbox. But by the time you see this, I should already have it. And I should have by then made a video for channel members to pick articles from. So if you want to be a part of that, you can become a channel member and you get a shout out in the video. But my channel members get their name at the start of every video. They get to see every video early, and they get lots of exclusive content. Right now I'm doing Vlogmas during the holiday season. But when it's not the holiday season, you get members' choice videos where you guys get to pick the topics. There's all kinds of goodies for my channel members. So if you'd like to join me, I'd love to have you. I'd love to say your name in a future History Magazine video. But let's start off talking about Emperor Constantine. And of course, we'll look at all the pictures and things after the fact. And sorry for the glare on the pages. It's this type of paper. This is the least amount of glare I can make it happen on the page. So I'm doing my best. Let's read about Emperor Constantine. Popular myth has it that in October 312 CE, on the outskirts of Rome, a moment of inner transformation reshaped the course of Western history. Constantine, on the brink of battle for the imperial throne, converted to Christianity. Constantine reportedly had a strange but powerful vision, a cross of light blazing in the sky, accompanied by the Greek words "conquer by this," more commonly known in Latin as "in hoc signo vinces," or "in this sign you will conquer." When he emerged victorious at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge against his rival Maxentius for the throne of the Roman Empire, he interpreted his vision as a divine intervention from God. Christians in the Roman Empire had been a persecuted minority, restricted to meeting in secret. Within just a few decades of the emperor's conversion, the Roman Empire would be dotted with imposing churches, while some of the most emblematic temples of antiquity had been abandoned. The struggle for power. Sure, you can see, there we go. Constantine was born into the military governing class of the late 3rd century, the son of army officer Flavius Valerius Constantius, or Chlorus, and his concubine Helena. The start of the 4th century was a turbulent time for the Roman Empire. After decades of civil wars and foreign invasions, Emperor Diocletian had tried to restore stability by introducing a system of government known as the Tetrarchy in 293. Each half of the empire, east and west, was governed by a senior emperor, or Augustus, and a junior emperor, or Caesar. Diocletian ruled the east with Galerius as his Caesar, while Maximian governed the west with Constantius Chlorus, Constantine's father, as his junior. When Constantius was sent to serve as Caesar under Emperor Maximian, he fell for the latter's stepdaughter, Theodora. He left Helena to marry Theodora, with whom he had 6 more children. Meanwhile, Constantine was sent to live at the court of fellow Emperor Diocletian of Nicomedia, which today is Izmit in Turkey. Constantine was brought to Diocletian's court as a political strategy to keep him under watch and ensure the loyalty of his father, Constantius Chlorus. While in Nicomedia, Constantine took the opportunity to prove himself on the battlefield, serving under Caesar Galerius in campaigns against the Persians and Sarmatians. These victories boosted his reputation and kept his ambition for political power alive. In 305, following the abdication of Diocletian and Maximian, Constantine's father, Constantius Chlorus, became Augustus in the west, alongside Galerius in the east. But Constantine was not promoted to Caesar. A year later, when Constantius Chlorus fell ill and died while fighting the Picts in Scotland, his army proclaimed Constantine as Augustus over Severus II, the junior emperor. Galerius, however, wanting to assert his dominance over the empire, only agreed to Constantine attaining the rank of Caesar. In the years that followed, Constantine aligned himself with Galerius against a common enemy, Maxentius, son of Augustus Maximian. Maxentius was expected to succeed his father, but was also sidelined by the Tetrarchs' planned succession system, with the throne being transferred to other emperors. Lacking the formal backing of the Tetrarchs, he forcefully came to power in Rome under the title Princeps. Galerius considered Maxentius an impostor and laid siege to Rome in an attempt to capture him. Meanwhile, Constantine continued leading Rome's campaigns against the Germanic tribes along the Rhine frontier. Following the death of Galerius, Constantine crossed the Alps into Italy in 312 with the goal of ending Maxentius's rebellion and claiming control over Rome. Fighting on the Tiber. As was customary before any major battle, both leaders sought guidance from the gods. Maxentius had his soothsayers consult the Sibylline books, an ancient collection of oracles. Encouraged by favorable omens, Maxentius decided to confront Constantine outside the safety of Rome's walls on the Via Flaminia at the Milvian Bridge, where the road crossed the Tiber into the peninsula's northern flank. Constantine, for his part, looked to the heavens in search of an omen, and he found one. The cross-like symbol Constantine believed he'd seen was the Chi Rho, a monogram formed by the first 2 letters of the name of Christ in Greek, Chi and Rho, which is this symbol over here. That same night, Constantine had a dream in which Christ commanded him to use this symbol in battles against his enemies. Constantine swiftly had the Chi Rho symbol emblazoned on his army's shields and helmets, as well as on the Libarum, or imperial banner or standard, where it replaced the traditional eagle. He then marched against the troops of Maxentius, who were spread out along the banks of the Tiber near the destroyed Milvian Bridge, blocking the crucial crossing toward Rome. Constantine demolished his rivals. As Maxentius and his army fled, Their pontoon bridge collapsed, killing Maxentius and leading Constantine to victory, which he was quick to attribute to the Christian God. It has long been debated whether Constantine's conversion really happened as suddenly as his contemporaries suggest. Before his conversion, Constantine, like his father, had worshipped Sol Invictus, a combination of several solar divinities whose cult had been elevated to state religion and had come to symbolize royal victory under Emperor Aurelian. Constantine had also likely come into contact with Christians while living in Nicomedia at the court of Diocletian. By the end of the 3rd century, Christianity had become especially strong in the eastern provinces of the empire, where it had spread rapidly through a network of trade routes and dense urban centers, with some regions adopting it as a state religion well before it received official recognition from the Roman Empire. An isolated figure. Constantine triumphantly entered Rome shortly after the battle in late 312, where he was acclaimed by the Senate. He was firmly committed to promoting Christianity, but the vast majority of the population in Rome still worshipped the pagan gods, so Constantine was cautious in publicly declaring his newfound faith. Perhaps as a reflection of this desire for political stability, the triumphal arch erected near the Colosseum in honor of his victory features pagan imagery and bears no Christian symbols, with the ambiguous inscription Instinctu Divinitatis, by divine inspiration. A year later, Constantine met with Licinius in Milan, then Augustus of the Eastern Empire. At Constantine's initiative, the two rulers issued a proclamation of religious tolerance that came to be known as the Edict of Milan. It guaranteed freedom of worship across the Roman Empire, recognized the legal rights of Christians, and ordered the restitution of their confiscated property. Constantine's growing control over the empire gave him space to begin openly supporting Christianity through imperial patronage. Within Rome, Constantine commissioned the construction of the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which would become the Pope's cathedral. Beyond the city walls, the imperial building spree continued. The grand Basilica of St. Peter rose on Vatican Hill, on the very ground where the apostles believed to be buried, which we already read an article about. Along the Via Ostiense, I'm not sure, the Basilica of St. Paul took shape, honoring another pillar of the early church. We also read an article about. For the Christians of Rome, these monumental gestures were more than architecture. They were a powerful signal that, at last, the emperor stood with them. Constantine took absolute control of the Roman Empire in 324, after defeating Licinius at the Battle of Chrysopolis, which today is Üsküdar in Turkey. To seal his triumph, he decided to convert the ancient city of Byzantium, which today is Istanbul, into a splendid imperial capital named after himself, Constantinople. Since he didn't feel at home in Rome with its conservative elite, Constantine wanted to found a second Rome in this strategic enclave at the entrance to the Black Sea, straddling Europe and Asia. On November 8th, 324, a few months after the Battle of Chrysopolis, he physically marked out the periphery of the new city by marching around it, spear in hand. Then, 6 years later, Constantinople was officially inaugurated. Just like Rome, the new city was built on 7 hills and boasted several forums, a curia or senate house, and imperial palaces similar to those that stood on Palatine Hill. The baths of Zeuxippus, the porticos of the city's main boulevard known as the Mess, I'm not sure, and other prominent sites around the city were adorned with works of art that had been plundered from pagan sanctuaries. In the center of a new porticoed forum, a large porphyry column was erected, topped with a statue of Constantine in the likeness of the sun god Apollo. What Constantine wanted most, however, was a city in which he could demonstrate his faith in the Christian God. The Christian capital. Pagan features in the city of Constantinople were soon overshadowed by the impressive Christian buildings commissioned by Constantine. His Church of the Holy Apostles, conceived as an imperial mausoleum, dominated Constantinople from its vantage point on one of the highest hills in the city. As well as enlarging the capital of his unified Christian empire, Constantine sought to strengthen the role of the church and make it the bedrock of the whole empire. He presided over the Council of Nicaea in 325, whose role was to settle theological disputes about the true nature of Jesus Christ. There, Constantine clashed with Bishop Arius and his followers, who argued that Christ was a being created by God but was not eternal. Their doctrine became known as the Arian heresy, whereas Constantine's view that the Son of God shared the same divine essence as the Father prevailed and was encapsulated in the Nicene Creed, the basis of the Catholic Church to this day. Constantine also honored the holy sites of Christianity. In Bethlehem, he ordered the Church of the Nativity to be built on the alleged site of Jesus' birth. And on the hill known as Calvary or Golgotha in Jerusalem, the place thought to be where Jesus was crucified, he had a temple of Venus demolished and replaced with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, also commonly known as the Church of the Resurrection. Constantine's mother, Helena, who had converted to Christianity under her son's influence, made a pilgrimage tour of the Holy Land, during which she oversaw this ambitious building program, as well as numerous other pious works. I think we read a History Magazine article about that too, reading about the Holy Grail. The last apostle. In the final years of his life, Constantine spent long periods of time in Constantinople, preparing a religious campaign against the Sasanian Persian Empire. But he died shortly after Easter, 337. As was common practice among early Christians, he was baptized when he was already dying, so as not to annul the purifying effect of the sacrament with new sins. In line with imperial tradition, the Senate of Rome decreed that Constantine should be deified as Divus Constantius and given the corresponding honors. In Constantinople, meanwhile, Christian funerals were held in the Church of the Holy Apostles, where Constantine's body was reverently placed in the imperial mausoleum and designated as the 13th apostle. Constantine's death marked the end of an era, but his legacy of uniting empire and faith would shape the course of both Rome and Christianity for centuries to come. See, the next page is the next article. So let's start looking at the artwork and photographs here. It says, according to popular legend, Pope Sylvester I baptized Constantine shortly after curing him of an affliction long debated by historians and thought to be leprosy. This is a fresco from the Chapel of St. Sylvester in the Santi Quattro Coronati complex in Rome, dating from 1246. I thought this would be him being baptized. Oh no, it is him being baptized. After curing him of leprosy. I don't think that's really what happened. But, yeah, interesting. Very medieval, very Byzantine style art there. The imperial family, this says. Cameo on the cover of the Ada Gospels from the 8th century CE, believed to depict Constantine's mother Helena, Constantine I, his son Constantine II, his wife Fausta, and his son Crispus. Interesting little cameo there. Constantinian Basilica of St. Peter. Around the 320s, Constantine ordered the construction of a basilica dedicated to the Apostle Peter on Vatican Hill. The building was erected on a large platform covering a pre-existing necropolis, where the tomb of the apostles believed by many to be located. The reconstruction shows the facade of the basilica, and in the foreground, the mausoleums of the necropolis that remained standing. I was about to say, these look like tombs themselves, but yeah, that's the old necropolis and the big basilica there. Very classic. It says, Constantine ordered a bronze column originally topped with serpent heads from the Greek sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi to be brought to his new capital. It looks like it's broken now. This says, Revenge in the Imperial Palace. A chilling chapter in Constantine's reign occurred when he executed his wife Fausta and his firstborn son Crispus from a previous marriage. Fausta, hoping to undermine Crispus in his father's eyes, accused him of R-word, failing to foresee the emperor's brutal reaction. Enraged by the accusation, Constantine ordered Crispus's immediate beheading, and shortly afterward the killing of Fausta in a hot bath. Victim blaming there, Constantine. Pagan writers later used the episode to claim Constantine had embraced Christianity less out of genuine faith than out of guilt, since it was the only religion offering forgiveness for such crimes. Yeah, that's a little unforgivable. But let's see what else we've got here. My goodness, Constantine. A mosaic from the Great Palace of Constantinople, first built by Constantine. And this is, of course, in Istanbul at the Great Palace Mosaics Museum. Looks like a beetle there. Oh, goodness. Looks like George Harrison or something. Emperor of the East. An aureus or gold coin bearing the likeness of Licinius I. Although Licinius signed the Edict of Milan with Constantine in 313, he remained ambivalent toward the rising faith. What a jawline. What a neck. My goodness, what a beast. Here's the Arch of Constantine. In 315, Emperor Constantine completed this triumphal arch next to the Colosseum in Rome to commemorate his victory over Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge. Yeah, the Colosseum's iconic, right? But right next to it, there's, with the sun rays shining behind it in this photograph, the Arch of Constantine. From Vision to Conversion. Eusebius, Bishop of Caesarea, recorded Constantine's conversion in his biography based on Constantine's own account. His ecclesiastical history offers the most detailed account of Constantine's conversion in 312. One evening, Constantine saw with his own eyes the trophy of a cross of light in the heavens, above the sun, and bearing the inscription, "Conquer by this." Amazed, he was unsure how to interpret the vision. That night, Jesus Christ appeared to him in a dream, commanding him to create a copy of the sign and use it in all battles against his enemies. The next morning, Constantine carefully described his vision to skilled craftsmen and ordered them to fashion the symbol exactly as he had seen it, while also summoning Christian scholars to explain its meaning. They confirmed that Jesus was God's only begotten Son, and that the sign symbolized immortality and victory over death, which Christ achieved on earth. They also explained the reasons for Christ's coming and the true story of his incarnation. Convinced that God was the universal Savior and Christ his champion, Constantine placed the Chi-Rho symbol on the labarum, or military banner, at the head of his troops as they advanced against Maxentius, which I assume that's what this is here. Engraving of a sacred military standard of the Christian Roman emperors, incorporating the Chi-Rho right there. And look at this artwork here. It looks like the moment he saw the sign in the sky with all the dragons and such, you know. You know how those were in the story. This portion of the fresco, designed by Raphael and painted by his assistants, portrays Constantine's vision as described by the historian and bishop Eusebius of Caesarea. Raphael took information from reliefs on the Arch of Constantine, using it as a document that he studied in situ. Okay, this is wild right here. All kinds of action happening all throughout. Here's the Milvian Bridge. Let's read this first down here. A fatal last stand at the Milvian Bridge. Faced with the imminent approach of his rival Constantine, Maxentius ordered that all bridges spanning Rome's Tiber River be demolished. The calculated move would force Constantine to lay siege to the capital, and Maxentius was confident he could outlast him on the defensive. But then Maxentius's haruspex, or soothsayer, reported a prophecy from the Sibylline books that the enemy of Rome would perish that day. Convinced the oracle spoke of Constantine, Maxentius sought a guarantee of victory. Rather than wait behind the walls, he led his troops out to confront Constantine in open battle. A pontoon bridge was hastily built beside the defunct Milvian Bridge, allowing his army to cross the river to the northern part of the city, where the two forces clashed. But Maxentius misread the signs. His army collapsed under Constantine's assault. In the chaos of retreat, many drowned in the Tiber, including Maxentius himself. His severed head was later paraded through the streets of Rome to celebrate. You can see in this painting here what's left of the bridge, and the big armies fighting across. This illustration depicts Constantine's soldiers with the Chi-Rho symbol on their shields, pursuing the troops of Maxentius as they tried to retreat to Rome across the pontoon bridge they had built earlier. The damaged Milvian Bridge appears in the background. You can see right there on all of their shields, the symbol. I see it now. Here's that symbol. It says, relief of a Roman tombstone featuring the Christian Chi-Rho monogram with two doves. And this is at the Museum of Roman Civilization in Rome. Power of the Sun God. This 3rd century silver disc depicts Sol Invictus, or unconquered sun, as a young man crowned with rays. The two horses may symbolize his triumphant leadership. Look at this, the first tetrarchs. This porphyry sculpture, formerly in Constantinople, stands today in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. It depicts the first 4 tetrarchs of the empire: Diocletian, Maximian, Galerius, and Constantius Chlorus. That's up here. Pagan sanctuary, it says. The Temple of Jupiter, a prominent place of worship, was dedicated in 509 BCE, the same year the Republic of Rome was founded. And this is an engraving by Alessandro Sanquirico in 1817. Constantine's strong rival, Maxentius, son of Maximian, held power in Rome from 306 until he was defeated by Constantine in 312. This is an effigy of Maxentius on the obverse of a bronze coin. And did they all just have really thick necks, or is that just the art style? And this big statue here, it says, the colossal head of Constantine in the Capitoline museums once adorned his marble statue in the Basilica Nova in the Roman Forum. And then up here it says a 4th century marble relief of the Cairo, the first 2 letters of the Greek word for Christ. And this is at the Pio Cristiano Museum in the Vatican. It's a neat article. I learned a lot. But let's move on to our next article about Viking funerals, going from Christianity to paganism, going backwards to pagan, but forward in time, but backwards in terms of age of religion. Here we go. The first image that springs to mind when we think of Vikings may be that of an axe-raising, bearded raider. But behind all the blood and glory lies a culture still shrouded in mystery, especially when it comes to death. For the Norse, the afterlife wasn't a single unified place. It was made up of distinct spiritual otherworlds. Some warriors slain in battle went to dwell in Valhalla, or Valhall in Old Norse, known as the Hall of the Slain. Here, warriors fought and feasted endlessly while waiting to be called by the god Odin to Ragnarok, the catastrophic end of the world. Other warriors dwelled in Folkvanger, the field of the army, ruled by the goddess Freya. The most commonly portrayed afterlife was that of Hel, a cold and misty underworld ruled by a goddess of the same name. Unlike the Christian hell, 1L, was not a place of punishment, but of stagnation. Viking belief were steeped in a fierce sense of weird or fate, controlled by the Norns. The Norns, 3 mystic weavers who spun the destinies of gods and humans. These afterworlds were not always the final destination after death, since the Vikings believed the soul was not singular, but could fragment. One part might linger in the burial mound, another might join the ancestors, while yet another portion could be reborn in a descendant. What's clear is that the Vikings showed a constant concern for a smooth transition between this life and the next. A range of funerary practices. The Vikings developed complex funeral rites around these beliefs. Archaeological sites across Scandinavia and beyond reveal an array of burial customs, although researchers are still working to complete the picture. The most remarkable feature of Viking funeral rites is their great diversity. Both burial and cremation were common, but researchers suspect that other, less traceable practices also took place, like scattering ashes or casting bodies into water. A striking element of Viking burials is the mound constructed above the cremation site. These mounds came in all shapes and sizes. The so-called royal mound was gigantic, while others were barely noticeable. The mounds could stand alone or in clusters. Some were marked with standing stones or surrounded by rock circles. Others were left unadorned. Beneath the mounds, the dead were laid to rest with belongings meant to accompany them beyond the grave: clothing, tools, weapons, provisions for the journey ahead, sacrificed animals, and occasionally sacrificed humans. But there was no consistent pattern in how grave goods were arranged in Viking burials, despite the intentionality. Items could be placed at the head, feet, or sides of the body, and the inclusion or positioning of objects like weapons, tools, or animal remains often varied by region, time period, and the status or gender of the deceased. Sailing beyond. A boat burial stands out as one of the most characteristic Viking funerary practices, although it was not the most common. Archaeological evidence shows this type of burial involved elaborate rituals that probably spanned days, even years. Ceremonies would have included large quantities of alcohol, music, the sacrifice of animals, and at times even the R-word and sacrifice of enslaved people. In some cases, weapons were displayed and heroic deeds recited to honor the dead. Horns were blown and skalds or poets performed. According to Ahmed ibn Fadlan, a traveler and diplomat of the Abbasid Caliphate who witnessed a Viking funeral in the 10th century, mourners would drink heavily and sing, for they drink unrestrainedly night and day, so that sometimes one of them dies with his wine cup in his hand. Archaeological studies reveal that Viking boat burials often included intricacies beyond mere interment. One of the most striking Viking burial ships found to date is the Osberg in Norway. Buried in the year 834 under a mound, it contained the remains of 2 women laid to rest with sumptuous grave goods, as well as a large number of sacrificed animals. At least 15 horses and 6 decapitated dogs, with the head of an ox placed on a bed. More sacrificed animals were placed around the boat. Detailed carvings on the ship's bow and stern depict intertwined serpents and mythological figures, symbolizing protection for the deceased on the voyage to the afterlife. The placement of animal remains, such as those of horses, dogs, or oxen, were highly ritualized, reflecting beliefs in their role as spiritual guides or sacrifices, ensuring safe passage. Grave goods, like finely crafted weapons with decorative inlays and imported luxury items, were positioned carefully, in some instances aligned with cardinal points, indicating cosmological symbolism. The posture of bodies, sometimes seated upright or laid with arms extended, appears to emulate readiness for travel or command, reinforcing the theme of the journey beyond death. The funeral vessels came in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes a mound was built on top. In some cases, instead of burying a whole boat, a few boat timbers were placed in the grave, or stones were arranged on the surface to suggest the shape of a boat. Within the graves, funeral items were similar to those found in the mound burials. The bodies were buried in a range of postures, seated, lying on their sides, or even occasionally positioned as if at the helm of a ship. Bespoke burials. Viking burial traditions have attracted a lot of attention from archaeologists because of their impressive mounds and burial boats. But understanding the significance of these burial traditions remains a challenge for researchers. Drawing on recent analyses of the Old Norse literary tradition, ethnohistorical data, and archaeological evidence, archaeologist Neil Price has proposed an original interpretation that seeks to explain the fact that virtually no 2 Viking graves are exactly alike. Price suggests that Viking funerals were personalized performances shaped by the story of the individual who had died. In a culture rich in oral tradition, were sagas, skaldic verse, and the Poetic Edda, which is a collection of poems and prose, preserved history and myth. The funeral may have been a final act of storytelling. Grave goods often hint at these narratives. In some burials, game pieces resembling chess have been found, likely symbolizing the deceased's strategic mind or warrior skill. In others, imported silks, Frankish glassware, or Arabic coins point to long-distance trade connections. In the Gokstad ship burial, discovered in Norway, dating from the 9th century CE, shields and even a tent were buried with the deceased, signaling both martial prowess and readiness for the afterlife. Price argues that although there is a general trend, each burial becomes a unique event intended to honor the departed. I can see that. I wonder if they like planned their funerals in advance and was like, oh, have this kind of party like we do now, I can see that. Just unusual because so many like Western, Northern European cultures had uniform burials, like the urn cultures and stuff. But the Vikings, they had their own separate parties, Interesting. The Salma ships. I hope that's how you say that. Sometime between the years 650 and 750, a band of warriors from the Mälaren region and eastern Sweden set out on an expedition across the Baltic Sea. They landed on the island of Saaremaa, located along a strait crucial for maritime routes. Whether the voyage was a military or a diplomatic mission remains uncertain, but what happened on the Estonian shore was undeniably violent. Many Vikings lost their lives. Survivors hauled 2 ships over 100 yards inland to what is now the village of Salme. There they buried the vessels about 40 yards apart, interring the bodies of more than 40 fallen comrades. Most were young, tall men, averaging 5 feet 8 inches in height, and several bore signs of blade wounds. DNA analysis revealed that 4 of the dead were brothers. In Salma 1, 7 men were likely placed upright in the seated position. In Salma 2, 34 others were stacked in 4 layers, some of which were separated by sand. The burials were carried out with a remarkable degree of formality. This indicates that the dead were buried in accordance with Viking customs and without concern that enemies might loot the grave goods. The orderly interment and absence of looting suggest the survivors had time to conduct rites without fear of interruption. The Salma ships provide the earliest archaeological evidence of Scandinavian sailing vessels used in warfare in the eastern Baltic. The ships were clinker-built with overlapping planks and fastened with iron rivets. Excavators recovered more than 100 arrowheads around the hull, many of which were stuck in the ship's timbers, offering rare physical evidence of naval combat. Salma swords and sacrifices. The bodies of the warriors had been carefully placed inside the ships and covered with large round shields made of wood and cloth, probably cut from the sail. The swords of the dead were placed next to them. Some had been ritually bent. Grave goods were placed alongside the dead, mainly Scandinavian in style. These included ornamented combs made of deer antler, small padlocks, beads, pendants made of bare canine teeth, bronze and iron plaques, and arrowheads. Bone remains of various animals that were also sacrificed during the funeral have also been found, such as sheep, pigs, cows, and several dogs. One dog was decapitated, while another had been cut in half. Also found in the Salma ships, scattered among the bodies, were more than 300 pieces of a game called, oh my goodness, Hnefatafel. My goodness, that's a word. Hnefatafel. This was a board game of strategy similar to chess. The pieces are made of whalebone and walrus ivory. One piece is particularly interesting. It was found in Salma II and had been placed in or near the mouth of one of the most decorated skeletons. That piece represents the king in Hnefatafel. Researchers presume that this was a deliberate gesture aimed at emphasizing the elevated status of this individual in relation to the rest of the group. Ongoing studies. The Viking board game Hnefatafel carries unmistakable military overtones. Played on a square board, it pits a smaller defending force led by a king positioned at the center against a larger group of attackers. The goal was for the king to be guided safely to the board's edge without being captured by the enemy. The game was not merely entertainment. It mirrored battlefield tactics and may have served as a tool for teaching strategic thinking. Boards and pieces have been found in high-status burials, suggesting that mastery of the game was associated with leadership, intelligence, and martial prowess. The king, found in the Salma II burial, may have served as a cautionary tale, symbolizing the disastrous consequences of failure in war. In this case, the fallen king never reached the edge. Among the thousands of Viking Age graves known today, the Salma ships stand out for the wealth of information they provide, not only for how these warriors died, but also for how they were buried. Archaeologists continue their meticulous study of the Salma ships, as well as newer discoveries, like the 50 Viking graves unearthed in the Danish village of Åsum, I think in 2024. By analyzing artifacts, skeletal remains, burial contexts, combat experiences, and cultural memories of Viking warriors, they bring to light the elaborate ways these societies honored and remembered their dead. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, look at this. Preparing for a long journey. Okay, that's it. Last page here. Look at this, my goodness. The illustration above depicts a typical Viking ship burial, modeled after the renowned Oseberg site in Norway. The ship is shown to have been moored. Let's see, where's number one? Number one, right here. Seems to have been moored, with a rope tied to a stone, symbolic of how it would have been secured if it were floating on water. Family members of the deceased would have led several horses and dogs toward the vessel. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of 15 horses and 6 dogs at the site. They are leading the horses down to the boat. These animals were ritually sacrificed or decapitated, pictured here, yikes, to help release the soul of the deceased. Their remains were then placed inside the ship alongside the corpse of a high-ranking woman right here. She is. And a lavish collection of grave goods. You can see it looks like they're about to be loaded up here. The entire vessel was then buried beneath a large mound. You can see them about to cover it up there at the mound. Archaeologists remain uncertain whether the mound was built before or after the funeral rites took place. Let's see some of the things they found there. This cart. This horse-drawn cart is the only one from the Viking Age that has survived more or less intact to the present day. A sleigh. 4 finely carved sleighs were found. They would have been used for overland travel and camping. And here's a bed. This adult bed measures just under 5.5 feet long and has carved headposts in the shape of stylized animal heads. And the prow of the ship, which you can see. the picture up here. It says the oak prow is topped with a coiled serpent form. Very neat illustration there. This is Saaremaa. Beautiful Saaremaa, which if I look at my map here, you can see right there by Estonia. Well, it is part of Estonia. The largest of Estonia's islands, Saaremaa has been inhabited since at least 5000 BCE. According to the Viking sagas, Saaremaa's inhabitants, called Osilians, had fierce clashes with the Norsemen on these rocky shores. Apparently, the Osilians also devastated the south of what is today Sweden. But there's Saaremaa Island. Over here we can see a gold pendant with an intricate spiral decoration discovered on the island of Gotland in Sweden. That's pretty neat. Look at this. Guardian of the Dead. Teeth clenched, decorated with silver nails and wire. This carved animal head mounted on a pole was one of 5 such objects found in the 9th century Viking Osberg ship burial. Depicting a wolf or dog-like creature, it may have been carried on the pole to ward off evil. Its discovery in the burial chamber suggests it had some ritual use during the funeral ceremony. That's so detailed, my goodness. And I bet you this thing is like this big in real life, right? Look at that detail, that's pretty great. The Viking ships of Saaremaa. In 2008, workers digging trenches for electrical cables in the village of Salma on the Estonian island of Saaremaa found human bones and some objects they couldn't identify. They were initially thought to be the remains of a soldier killed during World War II, but archaeologist Marja Konsa realized that they were much older, dating back to the Viking Age. Further investigation revealed the remains of a ship now referred to as Salma I. 2 years later, archaeologist Yuri Pietz located a second Viking ship, buried about 40 yards away. The 2 ships arrived in Estonia some 1,300 years ago, carrying warriors who never returned home. There's a little map over here of some Scandinavian places. There's the Osberg site in Norway. There's Salma and Saaremaa. And it looks like some other sites there in Denmark. And some major cities as well. Hilts recovered from the Salma ships. In total, at least 40 swords were found on board. Deer antler combs like these were found on the Salma ships. Pieces of Viking board game and 1 of 6 gaming dice were discovered. Look at this. The Salma I as it looked when first discovered, with the remains of 7 people inside. Wow. It looks like they're still digging it out. And then down here, oh, that's it from above, it looks like. This photograph of the Salma II shows the hull print on the right, and on the left, the skeletons of Viking warriors stacked in the rear, right here. Wow. It's like looking at a ship underwater almost. Look at this. The Gokstad ship. This vessel, made of oak timbers, is about 17 feet wide and 76 feet long, and dates from the end of the 9th century. It was discovered in 1880 at Gokstad Farm in Norway. Although the ship was built to be sailed, the body of a man was found inside in a burial chamber. Some speculate he may be the legendary King Olaf Geirstadolf, but that is not confirmed. And this is in the Museum of the Viking Age in Oslo. Pretty incredible. We saw this on the cover of the magazine. The Gotland's picture stones. Norse on the island of Gotland, Sweden, developed a tradition of decorating large carved stones with painted images, often featuring ships. Early stones were placed near graves or memorials, and later ones in public places. Below and right, a Gotlandic picture stone and the top of another, and these are in the Buggen Open Air Museum. Yeah, we saw this on the cover of the magazine. You can see the ships and kinds of events happening. A big ship down here, the big sail. And then this is the top of a stone. We see a big horse, people floating around, a big goat thing. There's another big ship. Pretty remarkable. A funeral pyre. Cremation, which required intense heat, was a common burial practice during the Viking Age, and building a funeral pyre that could burn at high temperatures was a valued skill. Fire itself was central to the ritual. It symbolized the powerful energy needed to free the soul of the deceased, and many believed that the smoke carried the soul into the afterlife. Cremations typically took place at or near the future burial site. Burial mounds, in turn, were more than just memorials. They often symbolized status and designated land ownership. So yeah, this is a depiction of a Viking cremation here. The big pyre, all kinds of hay and wood underneath, leaving them on a slab with some offerings. Looks like she's holding a sword as well. And the loved ones surrounding, including little doggy. Look at this. Lindholm Hoya. I think that's how you say that. I'm probably wrong. This well-preserved cemetery in northern Denmark contains about 700 cremation graves from the Iron Age and the Viking Age. Some of the graves are marked by stones arranged to form the outlines of ships. You can see one right here. That's pretty great. You know me, I love stuff like this. I love old standing stones. That's amazing. Look at this huge field. My goodness, that's incredible. Over here, there's a hilt of a 9th century iron sword found in Hedeby, Germany. Can you see? There we go. And then look at this great stone here. Oh my goodness. This is the Onensog runestone. The runic text that appears on this stone in Västmanland, Sweden reads, Folkvid raised all these stones after Hayden, Onen's brother. Onen's brother had carved the runes. Okay. This is... My goodness, there's so much Swedish. Onentag is Sweden's largest burial mound. Interesting. Oh, I see the mound back here. Can you see? It's a glare. That's pretty neat. Wow. Runestones are also really cool. Any old rocks are fantastic. Anyway, that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. More History Magazine will be coming in January. And I don't know what will be coming because my channel members will get to choose what I read about. So if you want to be a part of that, you can click the join button or the first link in the description box. I'd love to have you there chatting with you and such. It's really fun over there. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night. Good night. Good night.